Sing 510 on Jordan's stormy banks. We'll sing the first, second, and fourth. Then Paul will teach us here in the auditorium class this evening. Good song, goes along with what we've been studying. And then I remembered verse 4, filled with delight my raptured soul, after this morning's lesson. So we know what that means. On Jordan's stormy banks. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. O'er all those wide extended plains shines one eternal day. There God the Son forever reigns and scatters night away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. Filled with delight, my raptured soul would here no longer stay. Though Jordan's waves around me roll, fill as I launch away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore.
Welcome to our class this evening. I had forgotten that I was teaching tonight last week, and so I got a big shock when I walked in the office Monday morning and discovered that I was teaching again. And this lesson, y'all may think I'm an absent-minded professor or something tonight, because there's just so much material, and trying to figure out what you're going to present and squeeze it into the size of a ping pong ball is kind of hard. But my subject tonight is Eilat, Aqaba, and Jordan, the country of Jordan then and now. And the Gulf of Aqaba separates four countries: Egypt, Saudi Arabia down here, Jordan, and Israel, all those four countries. And if we'd have made our trip in February, we would have touched three of those. We would have come across the Sinai down through here, and then we would have gone to Eilat, and then crossed over at Aqaba into the country of Jordan, and then later into Israel. Again, just a different little map of the area. And you've got these two cities now. At one time, probably one city, but now we're actually going to talk about three cities there. But I'm just showing two of them, but in a very strategic location. Even today, what a strategic location. And I hadn't even seen all the news today, but I've seen some headlines that There's activity in the Red Sea, even as we speak right now. Now, you've got Eilat in Israel and Aqaba in Jordan. Anybody ever been down that State Street? One side you're in Virginia and one side in Tennessee. I believe when I was in high school, we used to go to the marching band festival in Bristol, and I think one year we actually marched down that street, and part of the band was in Virginia and part in Tennessee, and as teenagers that just seemed really weird. And but I took that picture. Gail and I were up there a couple of years ago, and I was so fascinated. I came out of the restaurant. I said, I got to take a picture of this, and went and took it. But unlike that, where it's just a dividing line, here Eilat and Aqaba are separated by much more ideological differences, and that gives you another idea, because the first mention we have of Eilat, and you're going to see it spelled, today it's E-I-L-A-T normally. You'll see it E-L-A-T, you'll see E-L-A-T-H as it there, and some Bible translations have E-L-O-T-H, have an O instead of an A. Again, linguistic differences, and not a lot I can say to explain that. But again, Eilat is a very important place, and the Gulf of Aqaba, all of that is a very important, occupies a very important place in Israel's history. So let's get started with Eilat. Beautiful seaport surrounded by these reddish-looking mountains, like you were out west, I guess. It would be what we would identify with. I visited there some 30 years ago. We had crossed the wilderness from Beersheba, almost in a southeast direction, down to Eilat, and spent the night, and then we caught a little prop plane up to Tel Aviv to fly back to the U.S. But it's like any beach town. If you went to Myrtle Beach or Panama City Beach, what do they have? Well, they got parasailing, they've got fishing and scuba diving and snorkeling and ride. Well, Eilat's the same way. 30 years ago, I'm sure today it's got even more thrills and spills, but it's just a typical beach town and a lot of tourists. So, neat place to go. But I used this picture for a reason. Those red mountains. You see, this northern part of the Gulf of Aqaba, south of the Dead Sea, these hills, this area was Esau's territory, Seir or Edom. And you may remember when Esau sold his birthright to Jacob in Genesis chapter 25, he sold it for some red stew, and his name became Edom, which means red. And I thought, how appropriate these reddish mountains. Well, one reason they're red, copper is the mineral that is mined in that area, and it became very important to the trade there in Eilat, even before the time of the Exodus. I mean, this is an ancient place, and so it stretches back before the time of the Exodus. It goes back before the time of Abraham. So we're talking about a very ancient place but those red hills are rich in minerals, and they were mined for copper and then other minerals as well. So the first mention of Elat is in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 2, verse 8. We're going to read it in a minute, but again, I'll remind you that if you're looking through your scripture or you're looking through Google or whatever, you're going to see Elat spelled a bunch of different ways, so just be aware of that. And when we pass beyond our brethren, the descendants of Esau, who dwell in Seir, away from the road of the plain, away from Elath and Ezion-Geber, we turned and passed by way of the wilderness of Moab. And a passage we're going to read in just a few minutes, it's going to actually say that Elath and Ezion-Geber are very near to one another, and so we'll talk about that. The account in Deuteronomy has the children of Israel leaving Kadesh Barnea, which is up in the wilderness, and going to Elath/Ezion-Geber. And read with me now from Deuteronomy 2, verse 14. And the time we took to come, I guess I ought to change the slides. And the time we took to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the valley of Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn to them. Now what's interesting is, other accounts of the Exodus, we think they were over in the Sinai wandering for 38 years. Deuteronomy kind of indicates, no, they came on over here and they wandered a lot of times from Elath up into Jordan. I don't know. I'm not going to, I didn't want to go into depth about that study, but this valley of Zered, called a stream here and a stream here, they feed into Arnon, and they feed into the lower part of the Dead Sea. The lower part of the Dead Sea. So they're south, and they're leaving Moab and the wilderness of Moab and moving north into the territory of the Ammonites. You may remember this is kind of the area where those two kings, Og and Zion, were killed as part of the Exodus and before they crossed. So again, maybe it just helps to visualize some of these things. Ezion-Geber, I want to go back to Ezion-Geber. It's mentioned 7 times in Scripture, 3 times during the Exodus. 3 times during the Exodus. Most maps place it in between Elat and Aqaba. So it's kind of in the middle. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. It kind of disappears later in Scripture, and we don't know a whole lot, but we do know that these 2 towns, Ezion-Geber and Elath, who were very near to one another, figure very importantly in Israel's history. And it's more than just a waypoint where they stopped during the Exodus. First Kings 9, verses 26 and 27. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. Then Hiram, remember old Hiram? Wow, how did he get involved in it? He's the king of Tyre. He helped supply workers and wood and all of that for the temple and the king's palace, Solomon's palace in Jerusalem. And now he's sending servants to go on the ships that Solomon built. Then Hiram sent his servants with the fleet, seamen who knew the sea, to work with the servants of Solomon. Now this is happening just before the Queen of Sheba comes to visit Solomon. how did Solomon get some of the stuff he did, all the wild monkeys? Where'd he get them? Well, his ships were going all over the world and bringing back a lot of gold, spices, you name it. He had his ships going out. And just think of where it is. You got access to Asia, Africa, those two continents. He can sail his ships out of there. He can reach India. I mean, he's a wise man, wasn't he? Well, he had those ships that could go all over the world and bring all those goods back to Israel. As we know, he was a very wealthy man. Let's see, what else I want to tell you? Parallel passage. Oh, I forgot that one. And they went to Ophir and acquired 420 talents of gold. I didn't look up how much that is. Probably some study Bible has it. I think it's a whole bunch of money. Even today, it would be a whole bunch of money, but then it was a whole bunch of money. And they brought it to King Solomon. Now, here we go. Here's the parallel passage. Now, all the work of Solomon was well ordered from the day of the foundation of the house of the Lord until it was finished. So the house of the Lord was completed. Then Solomon went to Ezion-Geber and Elath on the seacoast in the land of Edom. Indicates that Solomon actually traveled down there. It's after the temple was built. I think it was after also his palace was built. Temple took 7 years. His palace took 13 years. So he's probably in his 20th year of being king when he goes down to Ezion-Geber. He went to the beach, folks. I don't blame him. We skip some years now, and we go to the divided kingdom. This is what was so hard about this, because we're jumping from the United Kingdom to the divided kingdom, and I'm going to flip back in a little bit, but hopefully we'll be able to finish. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, who was 16 years old. This is after they killed his daddy, Amaziah. They killed him, and so they take 16-year-old Azariah and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah. Uh-oh. So something has happened in the interim. Well, the Edomites, they rebelled, and evidently they took control. And so Azariah, he's going to be called Uzziah in a minute, he rebuilt Elath. He restored it back to Judah after the king, talking about his daddy, rested with his fathers. And no, I don't want to go there yet. There's a parallel passage in 2 Chronicles 26, verses 1 and 2. I don't have a slide for it. 2 Chronicles 26, 1 and 2. Now all the people of Judah took Uzziah. One place is called Uzziah, one place is called Azariah. If that doesn't make you confused, it makes my head swim. But anyway, that's what they do. He was 16 years old and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. He built Elath and restored it to Judah after the king rested with his father. So basically the same thing. But earlier, his daddy, King Amaziah, had defeated the Edomites, and he had quite a victory over the Edomites. So his father was the one who actually repelled the Edomites, kicked them out, and then his son takes over Elath and rebuilds the city because it's a very important seaport for Judah. But their control didn't last long. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to make war, and they besieged Ahaz but could not overcome him. At that time, Rezin, king of Syria, captured Elath for Syria. Now they've come way down to capture that, but remember, it's a strategic seaport, and drove the men of Judah from Elath. Then the Edomites went to Elath and dwelt there to this day. And that's back to Ezion-Geber. It's not mentioned after the reign of Jehoshaphat. Now, if you remember Jehoshaphat, he was one of the kings of Judah, and a century after Solomon built ships, and Solomon built his ships about 950 BC. A century later, Jehoshaphat's building ships down in Ezion-Geber. Doesn't say Elath, but it says Ezion-Geber. So, however, there's not a whole lot written, but his building of ships was doomed from the beginning because he aligned himself with an evil king, an Israelite king named Ahaziah. So let's read 1 Kings 22:48. Jehoshaphat made merchant ships to go to Ophir for gold, but they never sailed, for the ships were wrecked at Ezion-Geber. I wish we knew what had happened. I wish we knew. He built ships and they never left the harbor. Wouldn't you love to know what happened? Well, here's what happened, sort of. After this, Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, allied himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who acted very wickedly, and he allied himself with him to make ships to go to Tarshish. Well, we remember Tarshish from the story of Jonah, and they made the ships in Ezion-Geber. But Eleazar, the son of Dodavah of Mareshah, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, because you have allied yourself with Ahaziah, the Lord has destroyed your works. Then the ships were wrecked so that they were not able to go to Tarshish. Well, the Lord did it, but again, wouldn't you love to know more about that passage? Okay, I'm going to confuse you even more. Solomon built ships, 950 BC. That's assuming he's into his reign after building the temple and the palace, and it's about 950 BC. A century later, Jehoshaphat in the divided kingdom is building ships to do basically the same thing that Solomon did, get gold and all of that from places. Now we move forward another century, and Uzziah or Azariah reclaims Elath, and just a few years later, within the same century, the Edomites reclaim Elath. I know you can't see all of that, so I put those big old blue arrows to help. We're talking about basically 2 centuries. Solomon building ships, another century, Jehoshaphat's building ships, another century, the Israelites get Elath back as a port, and then they lose it about 25 years later. So that maybe gives you a time frame that's helpful. Elath, as I said, was an ancient town. We know that it was there in the 15th century when the Exodus occurs, but it was really there much, much earlier. So we've talked about Elath. Let's talk about Aqaba. I'll help you a little bit. Here's the Gulf of Aqaba, or the northern end of the Red Sea. Here's Elath on the left. We believe Ezion-Geber was somewhere in the middle, and here is Aqaba today. And this is the dividing line between Israel and Jordan. But notice this little word here, A-Y-L-A. I don't know if you can see that or not, but Elah. Elath in Arabic became Elah. And it basically means red. And that later became Aqaba in the medieval period. We're probably talking about 1000 AD or later before it became known as Aqaba. Before that, it was known as Elah. And we believe that Aqaba was the original site of Eilat. Again, without going into all the details, but that's what the historians say, that Aqaba was actually originally Eilat. And there are all kinds of diggings that have been done and all, but I don't know any point in going into all of that. Let's see, what do I want to tell you about Aqaba? It's the only coastal city that Jordan has. So is it important to Jordan? You better believe it. It's the most populous city on the Gulf of Aqaba. And so Jordan has that. You would think maybe the Saudis would build something down there, but they haven't. So Aqaba still has that. Again, it's a strategic location between Asia and Africa. So it's been an important port for thousands of years. Again, we talked about the mining that was in the area, which made it very important. It was captured by the Assyrians, captured by the Babylonians, captured by the Greeks, and then it became a Roman colony. And so, you remember St. Catherine's? We talked about those Bedouins who came from Eastern Europe, and they converted to Islam in the late 7th century. Guess what happened at Aqaba? The Muslims, the Islamic armies came in, captured Aqaba, and probably Eilat too, captured that city, and they became Muslim. Now that's changed through the years. The Crusaders got involved, and they had it so finally after the 12th century it was totally Islamic. The Crusaders were never able to get it back once again towards the end of the 12th century. Even today, though, there's some Christian influence in Jordan. And I think maybe that's the reason that Jordan is a more moderate Arab nation. And that's a good thing. It's been a good thing. Anyway, after 1170, Aqaba was totally under Islamic rule and has been ever since then. And that brings us to Jordan. I'm making more progress than I thought I'd make. Jordan, there we are. It's Aqaba. Jordan has a funny shape, almost a fan shape. Here's the Dead Sea. It goes up to basically the tip of the Sea of Galilee, and then it branches off to the west, borders with Syria and Iraq, and Arabia on the south. It's surrounded by some rough people sometimes throughout history. And yet, as we look at Jordan, it's one of our allies. I never did get to go there, but our military trained with them, and they come over here and train, and we've had good relations with them. Now, it's gotten tense a few times when Arab tensions rise. They have to see what side their bread is buttered on, and they've had to make some tough choices. But on the other hand, throughout time, they have been very moderate. They have like a democratic dynasty. It's kind of interesting, not like the other Arab countries. They have a little more democracy involved, but a very good place. It gained its independence in 1946. Now remember, Israel was what, 1947, 8? 48? So Jordan first became an emirate like in 1920s, and then it became a British protectorate, and then in 1946 it gained its independence, and it's had that ever since. But I just think it's important to think about that timeline, and then when Israel gained its independence and became a nation, they're basically in the same time frame. The capital of Jordan is Amman. There it is. Amman up here northeast of the Dead Sea. But it figures in Old Testament history under the name of Rabbah. Rabbah, R-A-B-B-A-H. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. Amman takes its name. I don't think I have a slide for that. From the Ammonites, the A-M-M-O-N. So Amman gets its, just change the A to an O, and you have Amman, Amman, whether it's an A or an O, the people of Amman, the Ammonites, came from Lot's nephew and her and his younger daughter's incestuous relationship with her drunken father. And Genesis 19, verse 38, named the boy Ben-Ami, son of my people, son of my people. And from that, he became the father of the Ammonites, the people of Ammon. Now, so you got the Ammonites, who are, we'll call them up this northern part of Jordan, as it is now. But there's another people down here across from the Dead Sea, the Moabites. Now we think of Moabites and we think of Ruth being a Moabitess, but Moab, this is one of the most horrible stories in all the Old Testament. It really is. I mean, you stop and think, it's just horrible. Those two girls needed a good whipping. They need more than a whipping. But anyway, the older daughter, the firstborn, she gets pregnant by her drunken daddy, Lot, and she has a son, and he becomes, Genesis 19, verse 37. That's where Moab came from the firstborn daughter of Lot. And, well, that's enough of that. Right here is Amman, but it used to be, the capital was Rabbah, R-A-B-B-A-H. So you've got, here in Jordan, three major nations that are involved in the Exodus, through all the kings, through the judges, through the kings, through the conquest. They have been there in Old Testament history forever. If you didn't have a chance to take the Lord's Supper this morning, it's down the hallway in room 105 on the left. Oh, let's see what else I want to tell you about. There we are. What can we say about this involvement in Old Testament history? I skipped the Judges. I've skipped a lot of the Kings, but after the conquest, or as they're going up, 2.5 tribes decide they want to stay here on the eastern side of the Jordan. Reuben, Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And they settle in the land of the Moabites and the Ammonites. You think there's some conflict and fighting during all that? Yeah, sure. Sure was. Oh, something else happened here. I guess I'm going to have to look at my notes. I can't remember. Oh, yes. This is where David is fleeing Absalom. Remember when Absalom has the coup and King David, flees across the Jordan. From Jerusalem, he goes up to the Mount of Olives, and then they cross over the Jordan, and then they say he goes on up to Mahanaim. Oh, if you know your Old Testament history, you know Mahanaim is where Jacob stopped on his way to meet Esau, and Mahanaim means 2 camps or double camp. So Mahanaim figures, it appears several times in Old Testament history, and David actually goes there when he's fleeing from Absalom. Oh, there's old Rabbah again. Rabbah. You remember when David has his affair with Bathsheba and he has to kill Uriah? It's a horrible story. Again, another horrible story. I usually like David. This is one time I don't like David. But David, his troops are over here besieging, fighting the Ammonites. And that's where Uriah gets killed. He takes the note to Joab, the commander, and he gets killed at Rabbah. But not only that, they besiege the city. They're ready to take the city, and Joab says, I don't want the credit for it. David, you come. So David travels from Jerusalem. He goes over there, and David actually gets into battle. He gets the credit for seizing the capital of the Ammonites, Rabbah, and he puts on the crown that's so heavy, and David's a big man, and it's so heavy it weighs down on him. That's another figure of Rabbah. That's enough Old Testament stuff. It keeps appearing. The Ammonites and Rabbah, they appear in the prophets. It's just too much to even cover tonight. But here's the New Testament part. John 1:28. These things were done in Bethabara, or the better manuscripts say Bethany. And so your newer translations have Bethany. The New King James Version has it as a footnote, Bethany. For these things were done in Bethany beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. And here's the Sea of Galilee, and just south of that is Bethany beyond the Jordan. It's in Jordan today. In 2019, when we went to the Holy Land, we had our services there on the Israeli side, and looking over there is the Jordan side, and they have their stuff set out for tourists and baptisms and all of that kind of stuff. We were over on this side, and you can see they were baptizing in that filthy water. I'm sorry, folks, but I wouldn't have gotten in that water. I'd read too many warnings, don't get in the water there. And so I wasn't going to do that, but man, they had people lined up. They rent you baptismal garments up there. Tourism just fascinates me. But anyway, it was a neat place to go. It came to pass in those days that Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. it appears from the way the scriptures follow and all, even in John's account, but John talks about, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. But it appears that Jesus made this trip from Nazareth over here to Bethany to be baptized by John in the Jordan. And then we come to one final thing I want to talk about is Machaerus. Machaerus. This was a fortress, a palace, a summer home of Herod. In our part of the story, it's going to be Herod Antipas or Herod the Tetrarch. But look over here. Here's Masada. That was another palace on the Dead Sea on the western side. But here is Machaerus, and it is in what is now Jordan. That's where John the Baptist was beheaded. And how do we know that? Well, Josephus tells us it was at that palace. There's what's left of it today. They're still doing excavations and all of that kind of stuff. But it looks like it would be about as hard to get to as Masada. But that's not the end of it. You see, it just keeps on. And we're still in the Gospels. And he went away again beyond the Jordan to the place where John was baptizing at first, and there he stayed. Jesus left Jerusalem, and he goes up to Bethany beyond the Jordan, and that's where he gets word that Lazarus, his friend, is dying. And he stays there. And you know the rest of the story. He lets him go ahead and pass away, and then he goes down and brings Lazarus back to life. But this isn't the end. And I had to end somewhere. There's a passage in Corinthians where Paul is talking about a king, a Nabatean king, who gets involved when he's fleeing Damascus after his conversion. And it's Aretas IV. He was a Nabatean king. Well, the Nabateans were these nomads who finally built a kingdom over in this wilderness known as Jordan. And whoever talks about Petra will probably talk about the Nabateans. So I'm not going to cover the Nabateans. But again, if you want to go to religious sites, biblical sites, the number one country is Israel. Jordan's number two. Jordan's number two. What a fascinating place. And we didn't get to go, and I'm still crying. Any questions? I know it's been kind of all over the map, but no question?
I had a question. They were building ships to go to Tarshish.
Where's Tarshish? Is that
Where's Tarshish? If it's in Spain, like most maps indicate, then there was no Suez Canal.
Yeah.
If they're going to Tarshish, they got to go around the tip of Africa, do they not?
Yep, and I don't know the wisdom in that one. I think I'd build my ships in Joppa and then sail to Tarshish. It is an interesting thing. Why would you build ships down there to go to Tarshish? Good point. Of course, we don't really know that Tarshish was in Spain, but that. Yeah, do what?
Unless there was more than one Tarshish.
And that's very possible. That's very possible. Well, again, thank you for your attention this evening and putting up with me. Have a great week.